during this very challenging time where we had to be forced to be separate from our friends and our colleagues, I was really grateful for this Anchor app, which has allowed me to continue the podcast after almost 1 year of working on it. It's free. You simply go to anchor.fm and download the app. And there you'll find all the tools that you need to record and edit your podcast, as well as to invite people onto your podcast through the app. Anchor also distributes the podcast for you on Apple, Spotify, and many other platforms. You have absolutely nothing to do except to record your podcast. If you have an ad like this, you can also make money. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. I would recommend it for anyone who wants to get their voice out there, has something to contribute. Go for it. Anchor.fm is where you go to download the free app and to get started. Good luck with your podcast. Welcome to a new episode of the Bees and Honey podcast. Since our last episode, a lot has happened in America, and I don't know which side of the fence you sit on, but I think most of the world is celebrating now that we have one person exiting the White House and somebody else entering. It's not really a political podcast, but right now everything seems to be politics in America. On this note, we will speak to someone who's not in politics. She's in art and real estate, and she has a few tips for creative people who want to establish some equity by buying real estate as opposed to art. I hope you enjoy this. Hi, Michele. How are you today?
Oh, Nicolette, very good. Nice meeting you.
Thanks for coming out here. I know you have a very busy schedule as a real estate broker. Am I correct?
Yes. Yeah, I'm involved in a lot of things in real estate and pretty busy these days, actually.
And busy with what exactly? What's going on? Because, I know you gave me a little bit of a hint the other day with the conversation we were on. But what's going on in real estate these days as it relates to the arts, perhaps?
Well, there's a few things. The real estate market in New York now, during COVID, in Manhattan especially, is a pretty soft market. And so there's actually certain opportunities that are coming up in Manhattan and some with commercial spaces. So there's certain movement that's going on that's usually not going on in the industry. And then personally, I'm working on this ArtCondo project, a specific project where we've been looking into different structures, and we have some land in the Bronx, and so we've been working on that too.
Oh, can you tell us a little bit more about that, or is it private for now? Or
No. With a group of artists, about 7 artists, we purchased a piece of land in the South Bronx, and we've been planning on doing a ground-up construction of live-work spaces for artists. With building rules that are specific for artists, and really having a community of artists that then connects with the surrounding community. So it's been a long project, and it's a big project, and with COVID, because the market has softened, it also affects that. So we've been just trying to pivot, honestly.
And what part of the Bronx is it? Because I had another artist on it last year, and he told me there were so many things happening in terms of art in the Bronx.
There is a lot going on in the Bronx, yeah. This land is on 152nd Street, the hub, the hub area of the Bronx. And, there's a whole art community in the Bronx. Everybody doesn't really know, but as more people move there and more people become familiar with the borough, people are becoming turned on. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of music, there's a lot of dance, there's a lot of visual arts.
Yes.
And there's the indigenous, the people who are from the Bronx, doing a tremendous amount and have done it for many, many years.
Like Jenny from the Bronx.
Yes, yeah.
In our heads, I know people come to New York and they think, oh, the Bronx, it must be so dangerous there, or the Bronx. They've heard from movies from the 80s or stuff like that, but it's completely different now.
Yes, it is very different. It's not completely different, but from what it was back, it is very different.
Yeah. And besides this shared studio space for ArtCondo, how else does your ArtCondo project help artists who are not in the regular mainstream money-making field? I mean, I don't know if you have any services that you help them with. I know you've helped me a lot just in terms of education, which is a big stepping stone.
Yes, education is a big stepping stone. I mean, creative people often are independent workers or independent contractors, so they can have more difficulties buying. So I am a real estate agent separate from ArtCondo. So the ArtCondo is almost like a development with artists, but then I try to help people who aren't interested in that to purchase so that they can gain equity, so they can get anchored into New York City. Like artists often throughout the years, you know, they get displaced because they move into neighborhoods, the values go up, the landlords jack up the rents. And so if you can own, right? And there's ways of owning. I mean, you tend to need some cash.
Yes.
But, you know, there's ways of doing that. And so I talk to people, I have classes, things like working on your credit, things like thinking forward, saving money. You know, there's a variety of different programs around, and education is key.
Right. Well, I'm really appreciative of the introduction which Uri gave to me, somewhat, I guess, online to you. But Uri is an interesting model because as an artist, he did purchase back in like the 90s in the West Village, and he's very happy with his studio/living space right now. Because when the prices started going up, he was thrown out of his studio in the West Village, but then he just downsized to his place, which he owned.
Yeah, and New York City is an interesting market because it's usually such a strong market that if you can buy in, and you usually have to stretch a little bit, you know, get out of your personal comfort zone, stretch to get in. But if you can own, the value of the property, as an asset, it appreciates almost every year. So 4 to 6% appreciation is a lot. And that doesn't count the value of when you're in it and living in it and not, you know, so there's a lot of value if you can really, it's a big stepping stone for the middle class in New York City if you can own.
Yeah. And that saves you the stress of having to figure out where your next studio space will be or living space or whatever.
Yes, and it empowers you. It gives you options, but of course it's usually a little bit difficult to own, you know, to buy.
Yeah, and then, like you said, you have to somehow get out of your comfort zone and make that commitment.
Yes.
And you said from your own standpoint, your parents were also becoming landowners or whatever you want to call it, property owners at one point in New York. And that was in like the 70s or something like that?
Long time ago, in the 70s in Queens. You know, my mother grew up in the Bronx, actually, and so my father grew up in Harlem, 96th Street then. And they got married and they wanted to move somewhere. They came to Queens for the schools or whatever, and they lived in an apartment building. They saved their money, and then they bought their little house for like $35,000 or something, and it was a big step. Yeah. You know, and it appreciated over the 20 years they lived there, whatever, and then I think my mother sold it maybe for 120. Right? So that's like a huge thing for a middle class family. It's huge.
4 times.
Yeah.
And so that really makes you a native New Yorker.
Yes.
What would be the best real estate advice you would give to an artist or a creative self-employed person at this point in our history?
Well, I mean, I would recommend thinking about buying if you can, and then to prepare yourself to buy, to start saving your money, and to think about your credit. That's a huge thing that gets people messed up. And then if you're an independent worker, to really start thinking about your taxes, because independent workers often take things off so that they can lower their effective tax, and you want to show as much as you can when you're applying for a mortgage, because most people would apply for a mortgage. So you want to think it through, look at the big picture, and have a time frame. You know, and I would recommend trying to do it. And there's all different types of inventories in New York City. And talk to someone, you know, talk to a few people to kind of get a sense of what's going on. Right.
And it's good if you have different points of view to balance them out in your head. So there are a lot of similarities between real estate sales and art sales. And I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that in terms of the commission structures, how some agents work together, or, I mean, you know, just sometimes people cut each other out of a deal or stuff like that. Do you know any stories that you could compare, for example?
Well, I mean, real estate sales works on commissions, like, or fees, like art sales do. And typically there is like a fee structure, which is usually done, but most things are negotiable. And then usually there's the person who's buying and the person who's selling. And in New York City, those are usually split 50-50. If you get more people in, it gets split again. But then people can negotiate their splits. So when you're buying or you're selling, you kind of want to understand how it works a bit. And if you're the person who's coordinating the deal, right, or who's facilitating the deal, in real estate, you often want to protect yourself because there's all different kinds of people who are operating. And if you're facilitating, you want to make sure you're protected, that your work is protected, because people look at these deals and they think, oh, how hard could it be? But it's actually pretty hard. And in real estate, I don't know as much about art sales, but real estate can be very bumpy. And the real estate agent is the one who's taking all the bumps, trying to keep it together, bringing it, making the team, bringing in the different pieces, and
you need a contract or something.
Yes, you need
to protect yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. And then in terms of investment, I know you said for the most part, real estate is gaining in value every year. I mean, it's not necessarily like that with art. I mean, I know some people who bought stuff a while back and they're still sitting on it, or they can't resell it, or they sell it for less.
Yes.
I mean, that happens sometimes with real estate too, I guess.
Yes, but that is a similarity between the two, because I would say in general, like, you don't buy art as an investment. You buy it because you love it and you want to live with it and appreciate it and grow with it.
Right.
And in the same way, there's different kinds of real estate. Like, you could buy as an investor or you could buy as a user, right? And as a user, you want to use it.
Right.
And that has a lot of value. So even if the market's going up or going down, if you're living in it, that's okay. It doesn't matter. It's when you want to sell it that it matters where the market is.
Right. I mean, I was speaking to one person as well, and he said to me, in terms of real estate, because you said speak to a few people, and he said he's only buying real estate if he can figure out how it's going to make money for him, or else it doesn't make sense, because then he's just spending. Even if he were to rent it out, sometimes it's not making enough to pay for it. And I think in New York that might be the case, like when you pay the taxes or the whatever. So I don't know. I mean,
but investors, if you're buying as an investor, those numbers are important because it's all about the numbers, right? But if you're buying as a user, it's different. Because if you buy it at one number and then it's worth less, but you're living there, that still has value for you, even if you're like underwater or whatever.
Right.
So you have to really be clear on what your intent is.
Yeah.
And then that influences. I mean, there's the thing of like, you don't want to fall in love with real estate. Like, you don't want your head to go because
where your pocket can't follow.
Exactly, right. So there is that.
Yeah.
But you want to be able to love it if that's what while you're buying it. Live in it, love it, use it.
And somehow be able to pay for it when you have decided that it's yours.
Well, yes, you have to be able to pay for it. You don't want to overextend yourself. That's essential because you could lose it all. Yeah. Right? You don't want to do that.
Oh my God! Now that you mention it, there was this article I read, a very bizarre article, and it's not really an art person, but she marketed herself as a creative person, and she bought like tons of real estate across Manhattan and Brooklyn. And recently, when the real estate wasn't giving back money, the bank started calling. And I think the article said on paper she's worth about $10 million in property, but no cash at all. Nothing is liquid. So I don't know. I felt kind of sorry for her, because if they started to, which I imagine they wouldn't, at least right now people aren't foreclosing on you during the coronavirus crisis.
I don't believe so, but the banks need to get paid, so it is a problem, and that can happen. You could be over leveraged, right? Have so much more property, and people get very close. Like, you don't want to be too over leveraged. A lot of people can get really hurt that way. A lot of people have been very hurt that way.
Yeah, just bite off not more than you can chew.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think, is there anything else that you would like to add that I didn't ask you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess with ArtCondo, like, I'm interested in artists knowing and reaching out to me, if they have any questions about real estate. I am, to have a conversation, 15, 20-minute conversation about their circumstance, to talk it through a little bit. I'm trying to help New York City artists stay in New York City. And sometimes buying, there's a lot of different types of inventory. So that's about it. That's what we're doing with the project.
Well, I think it's really, really a good project. For myself, I've seen it not just in New York, but if you go to Paris, all the studios have been moved, not even to the borders of Paris anymore, but even to other towns outside of Paris.
Oh, really?
Or even if you go to London, there are not that many people, unless you're like, a big money-making artist, like let's say Damien Hirst or whoever, and I think he even has his studio in the countryside just because he has a big house there. But it's happening all over, so if people have resources like you to figure it out, then that would be great. And people find you on ArtCondo.com.
Yeah, ArtCondo.com. And sometimes I can help people maybe buy together with a friend. There's ways, legal ways.
Yes.
And of course you have to be protected, but maybe you have the cash and she has the income.
Yes, yeah.
Something
someone
like that.
has the credit, someone has the cash,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's ways to think it through, and usually people don't do it because it's a little complicated, but it's a little bit of a challenge, and so...
Well, I think if you have good legal advice and you hopefully are friends and trust each other, it can work out.
Well, yeah, but you need the legal paperwork,
the
signed paperwork. Because even the best of friends is like the best
Absolutely.
of lovers.
Exactly. Oh my God, I don't even want to get into that. I mean, in the early 2000s, there would all be these stories going around of people that would have been divorced if they didn't share real estate. They would have been divorced already if they didn't live together.
This real estate, and that makes me think, I just want to say, because this real estate as an investment, supposedly I've read about blue chip artists from the 70s and 80s and 90s who did better with their lofts in Soho than their blue chip sales.
I can understand that.
I can totally understand that's remarkable.
Yeah.
That is remarkable.
Yeah.
So I think that should be, and again, I think you want to use it. I work with investors, but I don't think that's where most artists are. You want to get into something that you can use, it can grow with you, it will gain value.
Yeah, and you can maybe leave it for your children along with the art.
Exactly.
So now that we brought that up, I just thought about, there's a building around the corner. It's a black building. I forget the number, maybe 630 First Avenue or something like that. And basically it's owned by the Solo family, who are huge real estate people in New York. But he had a huge art collection as well, which he started as a foundation, or he's made it a foundation. It's not accessible to the public, but there are a lot of these real estate guys who are also art collectors or art people who are into real estate. So there's a lot of correlation somehow.
Yes, there is. They're both assets.
Yes.
That's kind of part of the real similarity, and big money that's involved, and the industries, there's a certain amount of opaqueness.
Yes.
And
there used to be another similarity where you had a property and you could resell it and use that money to reinvest, and it wasn't as taxed as heavily.
Yes.
It was the same with art until recently, and then they changed it.
I was just talking to an accountant about that, funny enough. Yeah.
I mean,
you can still do it with real estate, though.
You can still do it with real
exchange.
Right.
But not with art.
Not with art anymore. And I think that probably was a needle for some art collectors, but not for the ones, like you said, who buy for love.
But there are so many collectors who have rooms full of stuff that they just bought for value, right? To resell.
Yes, that too, for sure. I mean, I know one collector, his heart was always in African American art, but recently he started selling because he's like, this is crazy what's going on now. I mean, he's finally able to leverage his collection to make some money, which he hadn't initially thought of, but it's working out for him somehow. So I don't know. I am a romantic, or at least I like to say so. I'm probably more a cynic now because I've become cynical after being a romantic. But I believe you should buy for love. Maybe not in terms of real estate, but definitely in terms of art.
Yes. I mean, it's an experience. You know.
Yeah.
If it's just for the money, I don't know. But everybody's different. So.
Well, exactly. If you have an investment mindset, then I think it can work for you too, if that makes you happy. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Anyways, well, I think, is that about it, or anything else you want to add?
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me.
It was, as always, illuminating, and you can find Michele on ArtCondo.com. Enjoy the weekend.
Yes, thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Michele Gambetta of ArtCondo. You can find more information about her at artcondo.com. Have a great week.